Between aging and busy lifestyles, many women struggle with maintaining their physical and mental wellness. At Aquavita Concierge Healthcare Services for Women, we can help you revitalize your health and reclaim your life. We start from within by balancing your hormones, allowing your body to achieve and maintain desired weight goals. We also specialize in peptide therapies, regenerative medicine, sexual health, and aesthetics in our state-of-the-art facilities. Feel better, look better, live better at Aquavita. Visit aquavitality.com and begin your journey today.
And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
Welcome to Bite-Sized Bios. This is meant to be a mini-sode that will accompany HDTH. Every week, I will pick a person from history and dive into their lives. All right, welcome back to another episode of Bite-Sized Bios, BSB. This is number 41. We got coming at you here. We're going to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. Going to cover his life, give you a elevator pitch of why he's important to history. But of course, this is the mini-sode of how did that happen. So we got to go back and talk about last week's episode, which of course was about Martin Luther King and his assassination. We learned a lot, learned so much about what was going on back then. I knew probably 40% of what we talked about before we actually did the recording. It was very interesting to talk about his brother AD being found at the bottom of the pool, his mom being murdered in their home church, which I think was just so. When I found that out, I was just like, that's crazy, that's wild. You know, that she would you murdered playing the organ. And what's even crazier about it, to know more about it, is she had just retired from the church. And if you know anything about people who retire, a lot of with their careers, they still kind of hang around for a little bit, after they retire in probably a part-time capacity. That's kind of what she was doing. She didn't really work at the church anymore. She was kind of living her life, in retirement. She happened to be there on Sunday for church, really was what it was. It was, and that guy, Morgan Wayne Chenault, he just gets up and starts firing. Of course, we heard the audio on the last episode from a man who was there, and he, to hear his words, I don't know, it was good. So, I don't know if there's much else to cover. We did kind of figure out, like I said, that it was more than likely not James Earl Ray. And I mean, they figured that out in the civil trial. That's what was found out, is that that there was more than likely a conspiracy done by the government and other people around to kill Dr. King. Or at the very least, I think that the city and the government were aware of some threats on his life and did little to nothing to try to not make that happen. And what's become customary in this part is I usually end up talking about were there any good movies on whatever topic that we talked about, because that's also a way that I understand stuff. I feel like a lot of people understand when people make good movies that are actually somewhat factually based. I feel like it's one of the best things that people can do for the culture. Is because a lot of people that will be the only interaction they ever have with that topic and that material. It's people will not take the time to read a book or even an article or even have an intellectual conversation about it. They'll just go see it, in the movies or catch it on TNT one afternoon while they're folding laundry, and then that's their understanding of it in its entirety. So you need to, if you can make a good product, then it can help everybody be a little bit more informed. I always feel like. As far as Dr. King, I don't think there's been, I would say, as good as movies as there should have. I thought about them. There's not really that many good movies about him. I don't even know if there's, let me look and see. There's MLK movie, MLK assassination movies. Something called All the Way, MLK All the Way. But still not really the definitive, I guess, or not, not Oliver Stone making JFK or something like that. Nothing I can recommend. What I can recommend is that kids movie that I watched as a kid. Was it My Friend Martin? I love that. If you are interested in that, or in like a kid's kind of stylized version of his life, definitely check that out. I say that to say they should be making, not they should be like continuously making, but like the Spider-Man movies, but they should make a MLK assassination movie, like a good one, just like for the record. But yeah, so that's that episode. We're gonna cover a couple other assassinations of the 60s, like the main ones, the big four. Basically, we've covered MLK, we've covered JFK, we're going to cover Malcolm X and RFK, definitely before we get out of the series. But find all the extras for any of these episodes at htthappen.com. You'll find the videos and all the work cited up there for everything that we talk about. All the socials are at htthappen except for TikTok, which is, of course, at htthappen22. Rate and review this wherever you find it. Give us 5 stars if you loved it, 2 stars if you didn't. Tell us why you didn't, because constructive criticism is always welcome. I don't think there's much else to say before we go ahead and talk about MLK's life. So without further ado, as we know to do, here is the episode.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper.
All right, so we're going to talk about Dr. King, MLK, today. We covered his assassination last week, and I thought it'd be fitting if we've covered his murder, we could at least cover his life as well. So before we get to his actual bio, what I thought was an interesting thing that happened in his life, which I guess is just a part of his bio, that was, I assume, is little known. Dr. King was at the premiere for Gone with the Wind.
Red, you go. Where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
The premiere was held in Atlanta, which of course is his hometown. Clark Gable, Carol Lombard, other Hollywood stars all converged on Atlanta that night to have the Gone with the Wind premiere, and I found there is footage of it. It's out there, right? There's footage of all the stars coming in, going to the movies. There's a band, everything. And the reason Dr. King is there is because the choir from the Ebenezer Baptist Church is singing at the premiere, right? Seems innocuous enough, right? Not a big deal. Until you ask, but you haven't, what are they wearing, right? You might wonder, what are they wearing? They're dressed as slaves. They're dressed as slaves. And so Dr. King, who's just a child at this point, he's, I think he's about 10 years old. Yeah, he's 10 years old. And he's down in the front, and he's dressed as a small slave boy, kind of just, he's not singing, I don't think. He's just helping to kind of I don't know, zhuzh it up, really drive that slave part home. And he's dressed as a little slave boy. I just thought that was very fitting for what would go on to happen in his life and who he would go on to become. To see that's almost kind of how it started. So, Dr. King was born Michael King Jr. on January the 15th, 1929. We'll get into that name a little bit later. In Atlanta, Georgia. He was the second of 3 children to Michael King Sr. and Alberta King. His siblings were named Christine King and Alfred King. Now, the family, the King family, as well as both sides of the family, had been a part of the Ebenezer Baptist Church for a long time. Alberta's father, which would be Dr. King's grandfather, moved to Atlanta in 1893 and became pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. So, for almost 100 years, give or take. So at his childhood home, King and his 2 siblings would read the Bible aloud, as instructed by their father. After dinners, King's grandmother, Jenny, whom he affectionately referred to as Mama, would tell stories from the Bible to her grandchildren. And King's father would regularly use whippings to discipline his kids, and at times, King would even have his kids whip each other, which is so odd. I had to kind of sit back when I read that the first time and just you have to look at, because it's about people's upbringings. You have to look at what made people, and you never know when you look in someone's eyes that they've had to beat their brother in front of their father. You'd have never thought that would be a thing, and it just it really does make you never know what people are going through, even if they don't consciously realize they're going through it. There's no way you come out of that okay, right? There's no way you come out of that unscathed. Something had to have gotten lost on the cutting room floor, right? I mean, I can't imagine even the purpose for that. To say, hey, it's one thing that we're gonna beat you, okay? However you feel about whoopings or whatever, but to say, no, you're gonna do it. You're gonna do it to your brother, or your sister's gonna beat you. So odd. So he would try to commit suicide a couple times in his childhood, and who knows? Maybe the little weird fight clubs his dad was orchestrating was maybe not helping. But one time when he was playing with his brother at home, he slid, or his brother AD slid from a banister and hit their grandmother. Right, she got knocked out. She was unresponsive. King thought she was dead. He blamed himself for it. Dude threw himself out the second-story window. Upon hearing that his grandmother was alive and maybe was just snoozing a bit, right, he rose up and was like, oh, everything's okay. And I know I said 2. I read that it was 2. I don't have the second one, but I imagine it was something else like that. I think it was something else like that. So his first speech would actually occur on April the 13th, 1944. It's interesting, his first speech and last speech would occur in the same month. Different years, of course, but the same month. King gave his first public speech during an oratorical contest sponsored by the Improved Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks of the World, in Dublin, Georgia. In his speech, he stated that, quote, Black America still wears chains. The finest Negro is at the mercy of the meanest white man. Even winners of our highest honors face the class color bar, end quote. He, of course, won the contest because, he's Dr. King. Then on the ride home to Atlanta by bus, he and his teacher were ordered by the driver to stand so that white passengers could sit down. So this would kind of be the foreshadowing for what would go on to be what I would consider to be one of the foundational points of his life is, the bus boycotts and the civil rights movement. So that's going to bring us to King in college. And boy, did he go to school. I mean, of course, he ends up being a doctor, he gets his PhD, and he went to a few different schools. The first school that he went to was Morehouse. And he actually ended up going there. Now, I always knew he went to school early. I always knew that he had gone to college, a little bit earlier than 18. And of course, we can say it's definitely because he was smart, right? That's for sure. But what I did not know, and what didn't actually make sense to me until I read this, is because he went to college during World War II. And so there weren't that many boys/men around because everyone else was in the European and Japanese Pacific theater fighting, So what Morehouse did, and I think what other schools did as well, is they were allowing high school juniors to join to basically apply to their schools. And so if you got in, you got in. You could get in a year earlier. And so that would also help the fact that they're even just accepting people of that age. I didn't know that. But so yeah, he went to Morehouse early. I think it was at 15 or 16. He played football there, which is pretty cool. When I found that out, made him cooler to me in my eyes. I like to think of my Dr. King with football pads, and like a mouthpiece, calling plays or something. But right before he went to college, actually, this was very influential in his life. He went to Connecticut to work on a tobacco farm, and this was very common for a lot of people during that time. A lot of black people during that time to travel for work. But what was big about this is that this was his first time out of the South. This was his first time crossing the Mason-Dixon line and seeing the differences in the white people that he met on his journey throughout there. And he remarked in his journal, I think, as well as letters home to his father, that he saw the difference. He saw that once they got above D.C., people were nicer to him. They could go wherever they wanted. There were no restrictions. No one was trying to control them based off the color of their skin. And it kind of blew his mind. What I also thought was interesting about this, and I never really knew how this worked with it, because I was, like I said, I knew that there was multiple people that I read in biographies and stuff that travel to the north to work at those farms or at different hotels, different stuff like that. This was actually contractually created by the school so that they would have money. Because I always thought when they said that this was like upon the students' need or their volition to actually save the money, take it back home, make sure you have enough to spend on college or whatever. But what they were saying was that Morehouse had actually already created an agreement with the farm that said basically the money they make at this farm will then just be used for their tuition. So it just gets sent back to the school automatically. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. They should have more stuff like that now, especially with the cost of college. So yeah, he goes to Morehouse, graduates Morehouse. Then he goes to seminary school. He does so at the Crozer Theological Seminary in Upland, Pennsylvania. During this time, he also takes some courses at the University of Pennsylvania, UPenn. This is also where he finds the first love of his life, Q. Betty Moitz. She was a white woman whose family lived on campus. See, I think they were nutritionists, I think. The family kind of worked on the food side of the school, and she herself was an art student, I think, at a different school, but she would be there quite a bit. That's how she met Dr. King. She studied at the Moore College of Art. They said she would come visit her mother often. So once they met, they initially kept their relationship a secret, but definitely from his family, he didn't want them to think, I guess, I'm not really sure. I guess there was definitely a conversation about the fact that he could not marry her because you couldn't be, I guess, an upstanding black preacher in the South and be married interracially. And so he said that's something he had to deal with. So that's probably why he was keeping it from his family, but they would try different things, out and about, and because they were in the North. they would go to dinner and stuff like that, and movies, and be out and be seen, and of course, and he had talked about getting engaged to her, but he knew and had gotten advice from some of the older men in his life that say, hey man, I guess you can't be doing this long term. That's not what this is about. And so they kind of break it off. And this is what would I say? This is in the late 40s is when this is happening. Like I said, he left Morehouse. He's at seminary in Pennsylvania. He's finishing that up, and then he would go on to Boston College. Like I said, this man was schooled. When they say doctor, they mean doctor. In 1951, he began his doctoral studies in systematic theology, which I didn't even know existed, at Boston University. And while doing this, he would also be an assistant minister at Boston's historic 12th Baptist Church with a man named William Hunter Hester. And so once he finished that, once he graduated, now it's time to go do some stuff, right? Now it's time to go minister to somebody. Get your preach on, doc. Get that done, right? So at the age of 25, in 1954, he was called as pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. So that'd be his first post as preacher. While he was studying at Boston University, this is where he would find the second, and albeit the most powerful love of his life, Coretta Scott. She was studying at the New England Conservatory of Music. I think she wanted to be a singer of some sort. She was also very schooled. She had attended the Antioch College in Ohio and was studying voice. She wanted to become a concert singer, it says here. She wasn't really interested in him at first. I guess she wasn't a fan, but he would not stop. And they eventually started talking on the phone, and she started warming up to him a little bit more. And eventually they got married on June the 18th, 1953, on the lawn of her parents' house in her hometown of High Burger, Alabama. They spent the first night of their marriage in the guest bedroom of a funeral parlor. Not sure why a funeral parlor would have a guest bedroom, because no local hotel would accommodate them. They ended up having 4 kids, Yolanda, Martin, Dexter, and Bernice. Wow. Okay, so now, since we said Martin, let's go back for a second, because I did say we get to the reason why he was initially named Michael King Jr. So what happened is, when his father was a younger man and trying to find his way, right, he went over to, he did a kind of a European journey, right? He went over to Europe, and he ended up going to Germany specifically, and seeing and hearing about the actual Martin Luther. Now, this is interesting because I just always thought it just happened this way. I thought that that's how the universe works. They just knew he was going to be a great religious orator, so they just gave him this name. Not really, right? So his dad was over there. His name is Michael King. And then he comes back, and he feels so moved, right, by seeing Martin Luther's journey from breaking away from the Catholic Church and creating this Protestant faith, that he's just he's like, hey, I have to have a deeper connection, right? I must know this man in a different way. I must name myself after him. So he changes his name, right? And he goes back and forth about actually admitting this and saying whether this is true or not. And what's interesting is actually Dr. King actually mentions this in the last speech he ever gives, which kind of like confirms it for those who are not really sure. He says, I think I actually have it here.
I would even go by the way that the man for whom I'm named had his habitat. And I would watch Martin Luther as he tacks his 95 Theses on the door at the Church of Wittenberg, but I wouldn't stop there.
So, of course, if you name, if you change your name to that, and you already named a child after you, I don't know if you have to do it, but it would seem pretty fitting that you would. So we did. That's how we get Martin Luther King Jr., when he was initially Michael King Jr. So yeah, gets married in 53. They moved to Alabama. Cue bus boycotts. Because not too long after he moves to Alabama, a woman named Rosa Parks decides she does not want to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus.
Yes, this might be any city of the Deep South going about its daily business. But there is something different about it now, especially here in the heart of the city. What's different? The buses are empty. Why? Because the Negro people aren't riding them. Because one woman, a seamstress, tired after a hard day's work, got fed up with her 40 years of living under Jim Crow. Because one woman said, I have had enough. And suddenly, just like that, 50,000 voices answered, Amen, sister, enough for us too. For refusing to give up her seat to a white man, she was arrested and fined, and the Negro people of Montgomery have refused to ride the buses ever since.
and thus begins one of the main points of the civil rights movement. And that, of course, is successful. I'm not going to go too deep into the actual moments of these actual civil rights points because we will be doing an episode on the civil rights movement. So if you're wondering why I'm kind of glossing over certain things, like we're going to get into all of that at certain different points. This is specifically about him, kind of the timeline of himself. But of course, like we've covered his assassination. Like I said, we're going to cover the civil rights movement. We're even going to cover Rosa Parks here pretty soon. So we're going to get into all of that. So yeah, after that, that's successful, of course. But then there's the first attempt on his life, which we actually covered, like I said, in the assassination episodes. You go check it out, episode 83. Izola Curry shows up to a Harlem bookstore, stabs him with a letter opener. He almost dies if he sneezed. Then we get to his I Have a Dream speech, which was one of the more important things I think that he ever did. I think it's one of the lasting works of his life. People that really don't know much about him at least know that. And I'm not sure if that's, and I don't know if that's good or bad, or if it even needs to be that binary. Because I feel like a lot of people who know that he said that speech don't even fully know what his dream was, or what the idea that he was kind of fighting for. I mean, people know he was about a nonviolent struggle for civil rights, but I mean, his true dream, I think, to paraphrase it, was to have a nation where people are judged on the content of their mind and not the color of their skin. I mean, I think I'm quoting / paraphrasing. That really was his dream, is that people could just be focused more on who you are and not what you look like.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
But yeah, that was done on August 28th, 1963, of course, in the National Mall, the Great March on Washington. The next year, he wins the Nobel Peace Prize at the age of 35. He was the youngest man at the time to have received the Nobel Peace Prize. The money for that was $54,123, which he said he was going to put completely towards the actual civil rights movement. But he was given that award basically for his struggle for the civil rights of the African American people in America. That's it. That's pretty much what they said when they gave it to him, because they track it and say between 1957 and 1968, he traveled over 6 million miles and spoke over 2,500 times about the plight of the African Americans in America. And then that would, of course, lead us to his death 4 years after that, which, like I said, we've covered it in episode 83 pretty extensively. He was gunned down. We mentioned who it may be, who specifically, who not. Lloyd Jowers was involved. James Earl Ray, maybe not so much now. Who really knows? But yeah, that's Dr. King's, that's his life in a nutshell. All right, so that was MLK, Martin Luther King, or should we say Michael King? I don't think I got his middle name before. Definitely wasn't Luther. Maybe he didn't have one. But what I find interesting about that is that he, his dad goes over and has this like enriching experience overseas and comes back all smarter for it, but then he's all like, but that's not what made me change. I didn't do that. I did it because I think what he actually says is, I had an uncle named Martin and an uncle named Luther or something. I thought they should be together. I was like, bro, why are we, what are we doing? Just be honest. Just be honest. And that's why I think it's interesting that his son, the day before he dies, just literally outs his dad and be like, yeah, well, this is really what happened. Like, is what we all knew. But yeah, I mean, he went, what I found, I guess the most surprising, not the most, I guess, is that he went to a different school for every one of his degrees. You don't always find that these days. A lot of people will just stay at one school, or get two at one school, or then one, or they'll just skip straight over the master's and get a PhD. He went to 3 different schools in 3 different states. That was kind of remarkable. We're talking Georgia, we're talking Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. But yeah, I think that's it for the episode. Going to go ahead and get out of here before we start to ramble too much. As we always say, give us 5 stars if you loved it, 2 stars if you didn't. Tell us why you didn't, because constructive criticism is always welcome. Always appreciate people that come back and press play from week to week. So thank you guys for that, and we'll see you next week with the next How Did That Happen?
1963, 9 years after the Supreme Court's decision to be in the March on Washington, meant a great deal. It was a high moment, a great watershed moment. But I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.